Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Epic Comic Book Wednesday. This is a world's finest collaboration between myself and Michael K Vaughan, where we combine the forces of stately Vaughan Manor and Hyde Cottage to talk about the comic books on which we have wasted our youths. And we've had a rocky road in 2023. Things keep cropping up in Michael's life that stop Epic Comic Book Wednesday from happening, but we're getting around to it this week. And this week it's an interesting demonstration of the dynamic involved in Epic Comic Book Wednesdays, because this event started out as an event on Mike's channel alone, where he was just talking about his Epic collections, Marvel Comics full color Epic collection line of reprints that they do on their vast back catalog. So it's an entire bookcase of Epic collections, and some of them have gone out of print and are valuable and whatnot. And I horned my way in. I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. I'll just elbow my way into this event. And as a result, it's Michael K. Vaughan who does the picking. He picks what books we're going to talk about. And that can lead to mixed results because he is so very often so very wrong. But sometimes it's interesting. I think our comic book tastes align as often as they don't. And sometimes he picks something that I would never have examined in detail again. And I'm glad I did. And this week is one of those, because this week he picked Ed Brubaker's great run on Captain America, The Winter Soldier, which takes aim squarely at what had been an absolute axiom of superhero comics, which is nobody's dead but Bucky and Uncle Ben. to explain that in Marvel Comics, even if you see a body, the person's not dead. Not really. They're going to be found again. Except for two iconically dead characters. One is Uncle Ben. With great power comes great responsibility. That Uncle Ben, who's if you're a casting director for Marvel Comics, you trowel the list of certain gray-haired actors in order to get them to die on camera when you reboot Spider-Man's origin story. You leave that in. And the other is Bucky Barnes, who was Captain America's boy sidekick during World War II. Back when Joe Simon and Jack Kirby invented Captain America, they gave him a boy sidekick, because that was all the rage. All sorts of superheroes had boy sidekicks. All sorts of them did, including a future ally of Captain America in World War II, the Human Torch. The original Human Torch, the android Human Torch, had a boy sidekick. It was an odd thing. It was an odd trend. One of the bits of business, one of the shticks that Stan Lee, I think, did most effectively, that he repeated as often as he could at conventions and whatnot, is how odd he found it at the time. One of these men, he even extended it to the most hallowed example in all of comic books, which is Batman and Robin. He wondered, what's going on here? What is going on here? The original founding trilogy of superhero comics, of superhero characters for Marvel Comics, includes two boy sidekicks. Captain America has Bucky, the Human Torch has Toro. It's only the Submariner who doesn't have a teenage sidekick. And in the comics, in those original Simon and Schuster or Simon and Kirby comics, Bucky is just a kid. He wisecracks. He's very much in the Robin role. He wisecracks, he lightens things up, and he's also a gesture in the direction of the fact that the guys who were writing these comics assumed, at the time probably correctly, that the huge bulk of their audience was, in fact, little boys. So you'd better have a little boy in the comic book to help out somehow. I don't think there was any rationale to that any more than there is today with a totally different kind of pandering. Pandering to an audience that you imagine is there but aren't sure is there is always a bad idea. Better by far to write to the audience you know is there. But in the Marvel mythology that developed afterwards, Bucky dies. Captain America and Bucky are on a mission, and Bucky dies. And Stan Lee wove this into Captain America's personality when he revived the character in the Avengers, 20 years after World War II. That Captain America was haunted by the fact that he had led this innocent boy into warfare, and he had died as a result. And that seemed to be such a firmly fixed part of Captain America's personality that forever and ever, writers might toy with the idea. Someone might dress like Bucky, or Captain America might think he's seeing a ghost. But the idea that the actual Bucky Barnes would be alive was not done with until Ed Brubaker did this story. Now, that explains why I was initially against this story, because I don't like characters coming back from the dead. I don't like that idea at all. Once you've established that a character is dead, it cheapens everything if you bring them back over and over and over again, to the point where comic book fans now laugh when that's the last reaction that they should be having. Like, for instance, what was it, just 2 years ago? 2 years ago, a little more than that, DC Comics announced with great fanfare the death of the Justice League. And they had an issue where the founding members of the Justice League appear to die. And fans laughed. It was an utterly ridiculous thing. It's become so commonplace that they didn't even care to take it seriously, even for a minute. So I objected at first. And my objections continued when I watched this run. I bought these as they were coming out, but there was a thing that was happening. I don't buy comics for the writing. I buy comics for the artwork. And the artist here is Steve Epting, who is an artist I really like. He's not my favorite Captain America artist, believe it or not, even though Jack Kirby is in the running. My favorite Captain America artist is Ron Garney. I don't think anyone ever did the character better. But that is certainly a source for argument. But Steve Epting is a terrific artist. He won me over completely when he did a nice long run on the Avengers that was incredibly good, incredibly entertaining. But here, there's virtually, at first, when I was reading these individual issues, I thought there's no trace of that Steve Epting in these issues. He's instead going for something very photorealistic. This is a very cinematic Captain America run. You are clearly supposed to be reading these issues in which a mysterious assassin known as the Winter Soldier seems to be in the employ of a Russian oligarch and is killing people and needs to be brought to justice. And increasingly, Nick Fury, head of S.H.I.E.L.D., and Sharon Carter, Steve Rogers, Captain America's girlfriend, start to think that this agent is Bucky. Slightly older and obviously brainwashed. And Captain America at first doesn't want to believe it, but when I first started reading this, I thought, well, Brubaker's a fairly intelligent writer, and it's got Steve Epting artwork, so I'll certainly give it a try, even though I'm hoping that it's not Bucky. I'm hoping that a new character named Winter Soldier, I'm fine with that. And maybe someone who thinks he's Bucky, but not someone who actually is. Because, as it turns out, nobody died in World War II. Any more than for a long time, the standing joke over in DC Comics was that nobody actually died in the explosion of Krypton. Except Superman's parents, Jor-El and Lara. And a recent ridiculous comic book story has Jor-El surviving the death of Krypton. We won't talk about that yet. Instead, we'll talk about this. And you can see right away, you get this. I don't know, if you're not a comic book fan, you're not going to be able to see what I'm saying, but that is very static and very drab. The color palette all throughout these issues is very drab. It's the kind of thing where you're looking at stills from a movie, and you really have to pay attention to the writing in order to even like what you're seeing. I don't like to pay attention to the writing in a comic book. But this, as you can see, this Russian oligarch is talking with the Red Skull, who is Captain America's legendary enemy. And this oligarch is saying, we've got a warehouse full of stuff here that needs liquidating. We need to get rid of a lot of this stuff. And the Red Skull is astonished by what he sees in a tank. A person floating in a tank. Apparently in suspended animation, apparently still alive, still perfectly functional. The Red Skull starts to see immediately the potentials here, and doesn't appear to get far in seeing those potentials. Here, I'm going to get you the... I'm not going to spoil the story, but the Red Skull is he's evil, and he's contemplating the Cosmic Cube, of course, his obsession, the Cosmic Cube, and he's contemplating this character when suddenly he is shot. And appears to be dead. That is... But before we get to that conclusion, before we get to that cliffhanger of the very first chapter of this book, we get a classic Captain America action sequence. And when I was originally looking at the action sequence, I was thinking, well, if I'm going to get Steve Epting, I'm probably going to get it there. He's obviously going for a photorealistic version of everything else, something that could be filmed. But for Captain America action sequences are absolutely legendary in the comic book world for eye-popping kinetic energy. Jack Kirby's the one who introduced that whole idea. A Captain America action sequence won't be like an action sequence for any other character. And that does sort of happen here. I mean, there's still a cinematic look to this. Very much so. But there is a kind of a bigger, more propulsive element to these. You can see what I'm talking about when you look at these pages. These very much look like storyboards for a movie. They very much do. And that started to bug me. Bright colors or no, that started to bug me. These scenes are really well done, but that started to bother me. Because you'll get 2 or 3 pages of that, and then you'll get page after page of this. Relatively normal-looking people just talking with very intentionally muted tones in the background, just all throughout. I think that was Brubaker's aim all along, was to make this a Captain America story that feels very real, that feels like it's happening to real people. Certainly, let me see here. Let me get you another example of what I'm talking about. Certainly, later on in the issue, in the run, we have Captain America and Sharon Carter and Nick Fury talking. They're talking with SHIELD agents, and it's all very. I mean, look at this. That maybe I'm not conveying what bothered me about these issues originally. Although I have to admit, I have to confess, this time around, rereading this, it didn't bother me at all. Instead, I was appreciating what Brubaker's doing here, not what Steve Epting's doing. Anyone could do that, but what Brubaker's doing. I appreciate it now in a way that I would never have done if I hadn't been goaded back to reading this. And this is the story of Captain America gradually piecing together who the Winter Soldier is. Is it actually Bucky? Or is it someone else? Someone who thinks he's Bucky or whatnot? And in the course of piecing that together, we get some absolutely fascinating flashbacks to Captain America's time in World War II. There you see Captain America and Bucky with a machine gun. There you see the Human Torches, the Human Torch and Toro up above there, and down at the bottom here, hauling something really heavy. He's the Submariner. We get glimpses of their time in World War II, which made me nostalgic right away. Roy Thomas did a great comic book called The Invaders, in which he chronicles the adventures of Captain America and the Submariner and the Human Torch and Toro in World War II. I think that the market could easily bear an Invaders comic book today. I don't know why there isn't one. But the flashbacks are fascinating in the way that they flesh out the character of Bucky. Because Brubaker obviously agrees with Stan Lee that it's a little bit weird that a fully grown man who has been enhanced by the super soldier serum would have a boy as his sidekick, leading him into the theater of battle, leading him into war. And over again in the course of these issues, it is made clear by U.S. Army officials and by Steve Rogers himself that is just PR. And that Bucky was actually extremely highly trained and did all sorts of the dirty work behind the scenes. At one point, Captain America actually says, I was wearing the flag. I wasn't free to do that kind of thing. But he was, and he was really good at it. At one point, Captain America even points out that he mentions that he had a successor whose grave is vandalized in these issues. That when Captain America went into suspended animation, the U.S. government kept Captain America, the entity, alive. And we get flashbacks, but they aren't Captain America's flashbacks because he wasn't there. We get flashbacks to the people who replaced him, including for protecting candidate John Kennedy in Boston. There is Paul Revere's statue there in Old North Church. And I thought these flashbacks, when I first read these, I thought these flashbacks were interesting because they refer to uh, two issues of the old Marvel comic book What If. Marvel had a square-bound, slightly larger, more expensive monthly comic called What If, where they had a different creative team every month wonder about some sort of hypothetical story. And there were two that were back to back in the original run of What If. One was what if Captain America had survived World War II, and the other was what if the invaders had continued to fight after World War II instead of, I presume, breaking up. And in that the second one, What If number 5, is an absolutely classic story that this is taken from. So when I was reading these issues for the first time, I actually talked to the proprietor of the Android's Dungeon, or the comic shop where I was going at the time, and said, so this means that storyline in What If number 5 is canon. It's not an imaginary story anymore. It actually did happen this way. Captain America is not in an alternate reality here. He's talking about something that actually happened. But it's in these flashbacks that we get a version of Bucky that we've never seen before. A version of Bucky that actually does make a lot of sense. A lot more sense than just a teen sidekick. There were parts of these flashback scenes that I very much did not like. Brubaker's moral relativism, the moral relativism of the 21st century, creeping in a little early here. At one point in one of these flashbacks, Captain America remembers that he just stands outside the tent while a Russian operative tortures somebody for information, when Captain America, of course, would not do that. He wouldn't stand outside and say, well, it's not my way, but I guess it's going to get results. He wouldn't do that, and he does in here. There's also a weird scripting faux pas that I couldn't help but notice reading. I missed it completely 30 years ago, but I couldn't help but noticing this time. There's Captain America and the original Human Torch and the Submariner. See, there they are. They're getting ready for a mission behind enemy lines on a bitter winter night. And at one point here, Captain America says, I'm counting on that, but how are you holding up with this weather, Namor? Toro's been shivering all day. It's an odd thing. People look at every page of a comic book. Editors are supposed to look at every page of a comic book and catch a problem. Obviously, that line of dialogue is directed at the Human Torch, who does answer. The Human Torch would not be bothered by the cold. He's not human. He's an android. And, of course, Prince Namor is not bothered by the cold. He has underwear on. He's obviously not. He swims in the depths of the ocean. He's obviously not worried about snowstorm. A little bit of an odd moment there. But I want to finish up by showing you what I think is the best visual in the whole of this thing. As bit by bit, piece by piece, Captain America figures out who the Winter Soldier is and what is going on here. I want to see if I can find the visual here. But in the meantime, while I'm looking, I can mention that this storyline, at least in its broad outline, is going to be very well known to even non-comic book fans, because this was the basis for the movie Captain America Winter Soldier, which is one of the best Marvel Comics movies that's ever been made. Incredibly effective stuff. That is the only reason why I'm not all that worried about spoiling things here, is because millions of people saw that movie. So here, I'm getting to it here. Don't worry. We get a whole issue where we get the Winter Soldier's origin, and the fact that he went rogue, and the heartbreaking fact that for decades he has just sat in a warehouse. Look at that. That's incredible. All those boxes and crates, all that the dust and grime, and also a tube with a living human being in it, who was one of the greatest heroes on the Western Front, if we're to believe the story that this is Bucky. I think that visual is great. Although, notice again, that visual is also exactly what Steve Epting is going for in these issues. Drab photoreality, the storyboard of a movie. This is, of course, yeah, there we go. This is the cover of one of the issues. See, that kind of visual is going to be very familiar to you if you've watched any Marvel Comics movies, because the Winter Soldier became a fan hit in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And this tells at least the beginning of that story. The story goes on from here. There have been huge collections. The Winter Soldier is a hit of a character. Ed Brubaker had a hit on his hands. The one thing I haven't researched, maybe one of you comics fans out there can tell me, is whether or not Brubaker bucked with the custom of Marvel Comics and retained any creator rights to the Winter Soldier, or even a back-end bit of profit. Is he a significantly wealthier man because the Winter Soldier isn't part of Marvel's cinematic universe? I wonder if that's the case. The Winter Soldier is one of the rarer additions to the Marvel cinematic universe. Most of the characters that are in that sprawling extended universe are much, much older, and not the single creation of any one individual other than Stan Lee. I wonder what kind of a deal Brubaker has. I'm sure he's not hurting for money, but I wonder how much his is the Winter Soldier. Probably not at all. Given what Marvel's practices are like, probably not at all. But that's your epic comic book for today. The Winter Soldier. You'll notice I restrained myself from talking about the movie. There's a lot that I could say about the movie, a lot. But the comic was better than I remembered. It was a classic case when it first came out of it not giving me what I wanted. I wanted Steve Epting in a big, gigantic, full-color, larger-than-life, extremely kinetic Captain America adventure. I did not want panel after panel after panel of a photorealistic Nick Fury talking with a photorealistic Steve Rogers. I did not want that. Now, later on, after Winter Soldier, I did get the Captain America run that I run with Ron Garney's artwork. Just unbelievably great stuff. But going back to this, especially, I had to guess that Michael K. Vaughan really likes this. I haven't actually watched his video yet today, but I have to think that he really likes it. I know that he likes the movie, but who doesn't? Who doesn't like the Captain America: The Winter Soldier, the movie? And going back to it, knowing that I'm reading it, so to speak, alongside someone who really likes it, really allowed me to just get over myself and not hold the story and the production that Brubaker and Epting wanted to do against them. Right? You can't do that. That's not fair. Now that I've gone back to it, I kind of see that it very much scratches the itch of a comic book in which you get the feeling that it could really happen. There's only a tiny bits and pieces of this that don't feel that way. That, for instance, Iron Man makes an appearance and has a little bit of action. Only a little bit, because when you're dealing with Captain America, same as when you're dealing with, for instance, Batman, you got to keep that to a minimum. Otherwise, the reader is going to start to ask why that isn't the whole story. Why isn't that the whole story? There's a lot of skullduggery and jaw-breaking and jumping out of planes and fighting and nearly dying that Captain America does in various locations in Winter Soldier's story, this first one, that Iron Man could have done in 15 minutes and Thor could have done in 5 minutes. And it's the same thing over in DC. If you're having a really tense Batman adventure in Gotham, maybe there's all sorts of high-profile crime families fighting each other and flooding the streets with blood. You don't want Superman involved in that except maybe as a guest appearance. You don't want Wonder Woman involved except maybe as a very brief appearance. Otherwise, the reader is going to ask why they don't just fix things quickly and easily, which is what they could do. So aside from that, this is clearly meant to be a movie, which makes me wonder what Brubaker thinks of the movie, the movie of his creation. Because he got permission. He got permission from the folks from the powers that be at Marvel Comics. Can I bring back Bucky? An iconically dead character. Can I bring him back? Imagine the hoops you'd have to jump through if you wanted to bring Uncle Ben back as a supervillain. I don't imagine you'd ever get that permission. But anyway, that is Winter Soldier for this week. Very happy that I went back and looked at this thing. Very happy. The only problem I had with having a digital copy is that there's almost no reason. One of the advantages of digital comics that I like is that you can pinch the artwork. You can pinch and zoom the artwork and zero in on really good details. But Epting is doing this without any of those details. This is an intentionally very drab thing. So I didn't get the advantage of that, but I got all the rest of it. I get what Brubaker's doing in this, and I really appreciate it now, far more than I did the first time. So the scales are relatively balanced when it comes to Michael K. Vaughan's picks for Epic Comic Book Wednesday. Which naturally makes me nervous. We'll see. We'll see what he picks next time, and we'll talk about it then. Thank you, BookTube.